Welcome back. Gary Ronald, the spokesperson for the Automobile Association, and Mike Schussler from economists.co.za, our guests in the studio this evening on the day of the big protests countrywide around, amongst other issues, tolling. Casata also brought labour broking into it, which I'd like to touch on in just a moment with you, Mike, just to get an update there. Gary, the other issue that we need to address here is the out-of-towners, because this only relates to Gauteng. But Gauteng happens to be the hub that everyone comes to from Mozambique, Zimbabwe, Botswana, everywhere. And we've touched very briefly on enforcement here, which Mike was talking in the break about some very interesting figures, which I'd like to get to, about municipal monies owing. Enforcement is not, we're not on top of enforcement.
No, not at all.
In any way.
No. And you're going to see, if you recall last year at the minister, with a bit of pomp and ceremony, introduced a national traffic force. That was actually funded by SANROL, and a portion of those guys are going to be dedicated to the Gauteng freeways. So theoretically, we should see brilliant law enforcement, and our roads should become the safest in the country. But it
You're saying should?
Should. But maybe. We'll certainly hope so, that will have an effect. However, what's not been addressed is the questions that we've been asking SANROL, and to a lesser extent the ministry as well, is what happens if your number plate is cloned? So if somebody sees your car, your white Beetle, and puts on your same number plate on his vehicle, you're still going to receive the bills in the mail. The same thing's going to happen to somebody who comes, up from Durban on business, or Cape Town. They will go to Natus, check his address, and mail it to him. Right. The issue now becomes a bit further than that, because it all hinges on ARTO being implemented countrywide, because under the ARTO legislation, they can refuse to re-register your vehicle or give you your license disc if you've got outstanding fines. Currently that happens in Johannesburg and Pretoria, but it's not an issue elsewhere in the country. And that's the one, I suppose, threat that they have for not paying the tolls. We've also not had any clarification on trucks or visitors from our border countries, people coming from Zim, Botswana, etc. There's no regulation or any way of collecting that money from the guys, because it is a seamless toll system. You're not going to stop and pay a toll, and the insurer is not going to actually have to stop and pay before you can exit the country at the border post. So we'll be losing that revenue in effect. And I don't believe that, we were talking about the non-payment issue. I don't believe that they've actually got that beat. I'd be surprised if we actually get a 15% payment.
Well, I mean, it comes back to what you were talking about in the break, Mike, where you can pass as many pieces of legislation as you want to. You can put as many things in place. If they cannot be enforced, they're not worth the paper that they're printed on.
No, absolutely. I think what people don't realize is that the whole expenditure, or the revenue of municipalities, let's put it that way, is estimated to be about 205 billion rands. Now, in the last year, approximately 15 billion was written off. And we've gone from about 30 billion in outstanding payments to about 55 billion or 54 billion. So we effectively have seen 30 billion, or 1/6 or 1/7 of that money not being paid. And in many cases, they can turn off your tap, or they can turn off your electricity. And the irony of everything is that even government departments aren't paying. So essentially, the whole system is at this moment in time on a very big brink. And at the same time, you've got petrol prices. People just can't afford these things. And where they're going to cut back? They're going to cut back on going onto the highway, perhaps, but the other lot are going to cut back and say, I'm just not going to pay. And I think there's going to be a lot of that. And if you just look around you right now, do yourselves a favor today. Go and have a look when you get onto our highways. How many cars have an A number plate, or a B number plate, or an N number plate? What's happening is that a lot of cars are being sold from Japan to these countries around us at a very discounted rate because they're second-hand, they're 3, 4, 5 years old.
Yeah.
They're very often better quality than our used cars, and they're just slipping over the border because for people it's a lot cheaper, and then they just stay here. And you haven't got that address on that system. So, as you say, it's becoming more and more voluntary to be part of this tax net. And the toll roads is especially worrisome because you're going to hit legitimate businesses that then have to compete with illegitimate businesses, if you wish. I don't like using the word because there's nothing, but businesses that are a little bit more informal, let's call it that.
Okay.
And they're going to have a cost benefit here against the small guy, especially. The big guy can probably absorb quite a bit of this, but the small guy who wants to remain legit is going to sit with a problem. And that's the issue here, because he's competing very often. And if you go and ask people to come and move your furniture, many of those trucks are no longer registered in South Africa. They're registered somewhere else because it's cheaper there anyway. The taxes are cheaper there. We're out taxing ourselves with countries around that are prepared to let a lot of South African businesses register there. I think it's really not thought through properly.
Gary, what would the AA like to see if I'm the minister and I say, I accept we've made a mistake, let's fix this. What does the AA want?
Well, we would certainly not want tolls. Okay, that's the bottom line.
No
So
tolling whatsoever.
Scrap the tolls.
Right.
Use the gantries for law enforcement, for tracking. Do what you want. Okay, that would be it. We would need to find an alternative source for funding. We would still say look to the fuel levy, renegotiate the terms of the loans if it's possible, and build up a fund just like we have on the slate levy on the petrol price, and start building up a fund for national priority projects. Even if you don't do anything for 3 or 4 years, at least build up that pool so that when there is drama, or when, like you have a flooding situation in the Kruger Park, which brings in millions and millions and millions of US from tourism, you want to make sure that that infrastructure works all the time. So we can go and repair that, or we can go and fix roads in the Northern Cape that need to be done. So we would say go and look at the fuel levy. Increase it if you must, but we were talking around about 15 cents or thereabouts we'd be fairly comfortable with, maybe even up to 20. But then actually make sure that there's oversight on the money that is budgeted and that it is done on a project basis. So that'd be about 4 or 5 points that I'd like to do.
Last night we saw the fuel increase. It's above 11 Rand now. We've still got the fuel levy coming in a few weeks' time. We've got the electricity increase coming in 2 months' time. Possible tolling coming in a month and a half's time. The squeeze is getting even tighter. If we thought we were under pressure last year, this year is going to be a lot worse, Mike. Do you agree?
Yes, absolutely. I think the increase in petrol price alone is the same as a 0.7% increase in the interest rates that we've had over the last year. And we still got at least 28 cents coming to us, but it looks at this moment in time that we're definitely going to get a bit more. We're probably looking at about a 40 cents increase, I would say it would work out, but obviously it'll change with 5 or 10 cents either way. But that'll take us over 11 Rand 50. That's the first thing. The second thing is, yes, electricity on the 1st of April for manufacturers and people that get their electricity from Eskom directly, the price goes up. For manufacturing and for the mining with 25%, which is becoming meaningful now, and 15% or so for households. That's going to be also quite meaningful. I think the other thing that I'd like to point out, you know, if you paid the state servants the same as the private sector, just exactly the same, and the state-owned enterprises, and you should actually pay them less because they have less risks. If we did that, we would have enough money in South Africa to build every year a new power station, which is over 100 billion, coal-fired power station now I'm talking about, 2.5 GFIPs. I can put down 2.5 I don't need to increase taxes. This is a false rumor. Okay, you're going to have to negotiate with COSATU on the other hand, and you're going to have to talk to public servants unions and going to say to them, listen, we've got a problem. We cannot afford you. And you know, if we look at South Africa, the problem in South Africa is not the difference between the lowest paid person who's got a job and the highest paid person. That's not our Gini coefficient problem. Our Gini coefficient problem is the person that's outside of the economy that doesn't have a job. And that is where our big problem comes in. And now the problem is that you're doing is you're taking more and more people outside of this economy, because now people are going to have auto problems. People are going to have all these things where it's going to affect their jobs. And we're squeezing the last son. That's not the way to do it. We have to squeeze somewhere else.
Okay, we are running out of time now, but I briefly, very briefly, want to touch on the labour broking issue, because I think COSATU managed to sort of massage a few things together here to get a whole lot of other people involved, because I can't see the AA marching against labour broking, to be honest. But because of the toll issue being pulled into it,
correct,
you were almost forced to become part of another protest. Where's this labour broking issue going?
I don't think it's going anywhere very quickly. I think we all know that we need temporary workers. Even COSATU acknowledges that. Seasonal workers or whatever, or where you have a problem with, example, an air hostess that you need extra in holiday time periods, and there are some that are retired. So they just don't want anybody else to make money. But I can't see how the economy can be arranged that you don't have somebody that has these people on their books and says, okay, you phone one number and then we'll do that sort of work, because the state-owned enterprises and the government are big users of labour brokers, so essentially that's what we're sitting with. It's actually, we're running around in circles, and what I think we need to do is what Prof. Gordon said today, is that we need a more flexible labour environment. I would go even a few steps further. We need to include 2 words in our labour legislation: you're fired.
Right, well, doesn't mince his words, does he? Where are you going from here? What's the next step for the AA?
Well, we're going to continue our public campaign. We'll be hooking up, obviously, with the role players. We don't want to be seen to be sticking with just one political party, etc. It's apolitical, this issue. We'll be continuing our conversation with government. We'll be continuing our conversation with SANRAL and, of course, our members out there. There is a very real, well, there is talk, at least, of some of the business entities actually taking this to the High Court. So we'll be keeping a very clear eye on that and see how that's actually going to develop. So we've got another 5-6 weeks, and hopefully there'll be a lot of action between now and then.